First thing I did after she took off was check my car to see if I left some spare change somewhere. I figured I could probably dig up enough coins out of the floorboards to give me a bite to eat before hot wiring the vehicle. I was only a little surprised to see my wallet, phone, and keys sitting on the passenger seat waiting for me. My head was spinning and I desperately needed something in my stomach, even if it was only gas station food. I did a quick run up and down the aisles, collecting whatever foodstuffs didn't look like they would make me throw up. A bag of trail mix, some chips, a stick of jerky, and a Gatorade. I brought them to the counter where the cashier Jack was typing something up on a laptop. I knocked on the counter to get his attention. He looked up from what he was doing and smiled and said, "Found your wallet, huh?" I dropped the stuff in front of him and answered, "Go figure." He rang it all up and I paid. Then he went back to his computer. Didn't feel like waiting any longer, so I opened the bag of chips right there. Then I had a small heart attack when hundreds of tiny spiders poured out of the opening in the bag. They were tiny, black, and crawling all over each other in every direction. I dropped the bag to the ground and started stomping them underneath my boot. "What in the holy fuck?" I yelled at the cashier. He looked back at me with a raised eyebrow and asked, "What? Did you not see that? There was..." Right then, I lost all ability to speak. There was something in the store with us. Something impossible. There was a spider crawling up the wall behind the cashier. Only this one wasn't tiny. This one was at least the size of a Rottweiler, with shiny black legs as thick as walking sticks and a pulsating black abdomen. I could see the reflection from the fluorescent lights in its bulging wet black eyes. And I could make out, clear as day, the thick needle-like hairs covering its body. It crawled all the way up the wall, turned upside down on the ceiling, and started toward me. I grabbed the spot on my side where my gun should have been and fell backwards onto a display of pork rinds. Landing on my ass, my voice finally came back to me and I screamed, "What is that fucking thing?" Jack clearly hadn't seen it yet. What? It was crawling slowly but steadily on the ceiling overhead. I waited quietly for it to move past me, never looking away. Only after it had crawled to the other side of the store did I lean over to Jack and whisper, "Did you see that?" Jack followed my eyes to the ceiling and looked back at me and said, "What? Is it a giant spider?" "Yes, what the fuck?" "No." The spider stayed at a constant speed and crawled down the back of the wall near the coolers, but I lost sight of it behind a row of groceries. I jumped to my feet and took a few steps to the side trying to figure out where the thing had gone, but it wasn't there anymore. I looked back at Jack, who was not reacting in the way I would have expected, or really, at all. "What do you mean, no?" I whisper-screamed. He sighed deeply and yelled out, "Marlboro, can you come here for a second?" "Who are you talking to?" He stretched casually and shut his laptop, then looked at me in the eyes and said, "It's the pain meds they gave me. I had to stop taking them because they were making me see spiders." "What?" "I know, right? Weirdest side effect ever, but apparently it's a thing. Brand-specific hallucinations. Spiders everywhere. On my clothes, in the shower, in my toothpaste. I decided that the pain wasn't as bad as seeing spiders in my cereal." "Wait, you drugged me?" "I didn't." The door to the storage closet opened and the clerk from earlier, the one who had painted my nails, came out drinking a beer. "You rang?" he asked. The cashier answered, "Did you give this guy my old pain meds?" "Oh, most definitely," he answered. "I ground up like 4 of them and put them in his water bottle." My heartbeat finally started to go back down to normal. The adrenaline spike slowly replaced by pure, undiluted rage. I tried to hold it together as I asked as calmly as I possibly could, "Why would you do that?" He smiled and shrugged and said, "I was just trying to help." I rubbed my eyes and took a deep breath. If he had been a little closer, I probably would have slugged him. Thankfully, I managed to keep my cool. This is just so fucked. "Hey man, are you alright?" asked the cashier. "What part of this looks alright to you?" I replied. "Yeah, I figured as much. You're Vanessa's uncle, right?" "That's right. You knew her?" "A little. She was a decent worker. Always showed up on time, never stole anything. I was bummed out when she disappeared. I sorta hate to ask, but do you know what happened to her? Maybe it was just the drugs, but I was having trouble getting a read on this guy. Was he for real?" "I'm planning on figuring that out. I take it you don't buy the story about her joining a cult? I got the quickest micro expression when I said cult. He looked at the other worker for a moment, then back to me and said, "No, I don't think she joined the cult." There was something else going on here. I asked him directly, "What exactly do you think happened?" "I don't know." The other worker piped in with, "Maybe a demon got her." The cashier looked at him and said, "What, like in Twin Peaks?" "Dude, spoilers!" "That show's been out for 20 years. Either you're gonna watch it or you're not." This was pointless. These two were using each other for deflection, and if I were going to find out what either of them knew, I'd have to separate them. The only question is, how? Right then, the cashier leaned back to grab his crutches off the wall and said, "Marlboro, take over for me. I'm going to lunch." "Okie dokie," said Jerry, or Marlboro, or whatever the hell his name actually was. He struck me as the kind of guy who might find someone else's name tag and wear it just because. "Hey," I said after the cashier stood up, "how about I take you to lunch?" He looked at me awkwardly for a couple of seconds and asked, "Why would you do that?" "I want to ask you some questions." "About Vanessa?" I really didn't know her that well. "About this town. I'll pay for your lunch. What do you say?" He mulled it over for a few more silent seconds and then nodded and said, "Okay." I checked my phone during the drive just to see what time it was. 12:05 p.m. Then I tossed it out the window. Even if they haven't bugged it, there's no way I could ever trust it again. We went to this small diner called Maryland's. We both ordered the same thing, a cheeseburger and fries. I took black coffee and he drank root beer. I let him eat before we got to the questions. It didn't take me long to devour my meal. Thankfully, there were no spiders. Whatever Marlboro had put in my drink had worn off completely, and the pain in my leg was back in full force. But it was hard to complain while sitting across from this guy. At least I had all of my limbs. From what I could see, he was a below-the-knee amputee. And the way he worked with his crutches made it clear that this was a recent development. So I decided to keep my complaints to myself for now. After he finished his burger, I tried to ease into the questions and learn as much as he would let me know. This guy was private, and all I could get out of him were the basics. His name was Jack, he was much younger than me and worked at the gas station pretty much since high school. And he liked to mind his own business. I finally got around to asking about his injury, not expecting much of an answer, but surprisingly, he opened up like it was no big deal. "I got a complex fracture a while ago and broke my leg in 2 places. Not surprisingly, this town doesn't have the best medical facilities. There were some complications. I caught a strain of antibiotic-resistant Antonicebatter, and long story short, he imitated a chainsaw noise and gestured like he were cutting off his own leg, then took a sip of root beer. What do you know about this cult?" I wanted to watch his face for any kind of a tell, but this time, if there were any reactions, he was keeping a lid on it. Not much. A dozen or so attractive millennials joined up with some charismatic personality. He recruited them from all over using the internet. Promised enlightenment and orgies. Didn't end so well. "I heard Spencer Middleton was a part of this cult?" Jack visibly shuddered at the mention of Middleton. "Interesting." "No," he answered. "But it clearly wraps up the whole story nice and neat, doesn't it?" "You think Spencer's innocent?" Jack laughed and shook his head. "No, he's very much the opposite of innocent. I'm just saying he isn't exactly a team player." Outside the window, I saw a cruiser swing into the parking lot. Shit, running out of time. "Look," I finally said, "some weird stuff's happened to me lately out in those woods. Things I can't exactly explain. And I'd like nothing more than to fall asleep for a couple of weeks and recharge, but I can't right now. I think there's something wrong with this town, and I think Vanessa got caught up in it. And I think maybe, just maybe, you know what's going on." "Why would you think that?" "The deputy's about to come busting in here. She seems awfully protective of you." The door opened and O'Brien scanned the place, spotting us immediately. Jack still had his back to her and said, "You're not wrong. Weird things happen here, but you're looking in the wrong place. Vanessa wasn't a part of the cultists. They died before she went missing." "How do you know the cultists died? I thought they were only missing." "That's enough questions for now, Nail Polish," said O'Brien as she put a hand on Jack's shoulder. "You good, Crutches? she asked him. Peachy, he answered. If there had been any doubt, that had taken it away. There was something going on with Jack and O'Brien. Maybe she was just protecting him. Maybe they were working together. Maybe they were hooking up. I didn't know. But it was damn near impossible to get a look inside his head. And the one thing I took away from that interaction was this. I believed him. He knew more about the cult than he was letting on. And Vanessa wasn't part of it. So that put me close to square one. I had a meeting with Roger in 7 hours and time to burn. The sobering fact that I had killed a man that morning in self-defense was burning in the back of my mind. And I knew that when the time came, I would have to deal with that. But this was not that time. This was the time to play through the pain. There would be a chance for a nervous breakdown after I find Vanessa or her killer. Jamie looked pretty shocked to see me. I didn't feel like explaining anything, so I just asked him to put 2 pots of boiling water and to find me some rubbing alcohol, floss, and a sewing kit. He's a good kid, and I hate to keep traumatizing him, but I couldn't go to the hospital, just in case. Once the pots were boiling, I dropped a sewing needle into one and my car keys into another. I knew better than most how easy it was to bug anything these days. Even my wallet was going to stay in the console of my car until I could get back home and order new credit cards. It was going to be nothing but cash from here on out. My nephew didn't question it for a second when I told him I was going to be driving Vanessa's Honda for the rest of the time I was in town. I couldn't afford the very likely possibility that my car had been bugged. He didn't ask too many questions, and I didn't volunteer too many answers. The furthest he got was, "Why are your nails red?" I have no idea. I strung some floss through the needle and bent it into a hook shape. This was going to hurt if I did it right, and hurt even worse if I did it wrong. At that moment, I wondered if it might actually be worth the spiders to keep from feeling the pain I was about to feel. I ripped off the duct tape cast one layer at a time, all the way down to the base. Then I peeled back the final layer to see a grisly X-shaped wound on my leg. Just when I thought nothing could surprise me anymore, I'm proven wrong. Son of a bitch. Somehow, someone had beat me to the punch. The wound was very neatly stitched up, almost professionally. The work was so clean, it wouldn't leave but minimal scarring. Next to it, under the dried layer of blood, I could make out shaky handwriting where someone had drawn on my leg with a black marker. Jerry was here. I set the needle on the table and asked Jamie if they had any old antibiotics in the house. Yeah, probably. I'm gonna need all of them. It's amazing the difference a shower and clean clothes can make. I popped a handful of painkillers, the over-the-counter kind, and took apart one of Donnie's old speakers to get the magnet. I'm not saying that I think Marlboro stitched a tracker or a listening device into my leg wound, because that would be crazy. I'm just saying I ran a few passes of the extra strong magnet over the stitches, just to be safe. Next, I went into Vanessa's room and stood for a silent moment, taking it in, trying to find the balance between respecting her privacy and tearing apart the place to look for clues. There was still plenty of time before my meeting, but right then I was kicking myself for all the time I had wasted getting shit-faced, when there were all these answers out there to be found. I did a quick mental recap of where I stood. Facts. This town had a weird secret. Someone powerful enough to make a flipped truck and 3 bodies disappear in the span of a couple hours was screwing with me. Someone knew how to imitate my brother, lure me into a bizarre trap out in the woods, but why? The sheriff's department was only pretending to look into Vanessa's disappearance. The cult was just a cover story. Was Vanessa even involved in any of this? I was swimming through questions without any answers, when I heard Jamie say, "Hey, Uncle Eric?" I snapped out of my daze and turned to see Jamie standing in the doorway. "Yeah, kiddo? You have a visitor." I would like to take a moment to thank my $10 and above patrons, Alejandro C., Official Jerboa, and Chaos X. If you want to be on this list, you can go to the link down below.